Hey guys, we're learning more about the Greeks today. Your learning target is I can understand and describe Alexander the Great and the Greek Empire, all right? And this picture right here on your slide is a picture of Alexander the Great, okay? A really, really impressive war general and leader, someone who united a lot of different types of people at a very, very young age, just 20 years old when he became the ruler. And that's just crazy to think about. I mean, that's younger than me. That's only a few years older than you. And he was a tough, tough guy, okay? And really remarkable. So we're learning more about him today and then continuing on learning about Athens and Sparta in ancient Greece. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and answer your question of the day. Let's go over it together. Who were the first people that competed in the Olympic Games? Hopefully you guys know this one, but maybe some of you don't. So it'll be cool to figure that out today and then give one example of a competition in the Olympics today. So what's an example of a competition that you've seen maybe on TV, or maybe you know of the oldest Olympic game ever? What's an example of one of those competitions? Okay. And then we are going to watch a video. So go ahead and pause if you haven't done your question of the day, wrap that up, maybe take two people who can give the answers to these, and then we will jump into a video about the Olympics. All right, so we are going to jump over to chapter 4. And if you already watched this interactive, that's fine. You're just going to watch it again. And it's super interesting, and you always learn something new the second time you watch. So we're going to watch Interactive 4.4 together now. So this is in your textbook, and enjoy.
Thousands of years in the making, what began as part of a religious festival honoring the Greek god Zeus in the rural Greek town of Olympia has today become the greatest show of sporting excellence on Earth. The inception date in 776 BC became the basis for the Greeks' earliest calendar, where time was marked in 4-year increments called Olympiads. What could it be? Why, it's the Olympic Games, of course.
So 4-year increments, that's how we get our Olympics now, every 4 years.
Competition fosters excellence, or so thought the ancient Greeks. In addition to sporting events, contests were held for music, singing, and poetry. You can read about them all yourself in classical literary works like Homer's Iliad and Virgil's Aeneid. Even mythical heroes appreciate a good contest every now and then, wouldn't you say? For the first 13 games, the ancient Greek Olympics featured just one event, the 200-yard dash. But over time,
the 200-yard dash. Some of you guys are starting track up soon. Does anyone in your classes run the 200-yard dash?
Exciting contests like boxing, chariot and mule racing, and even a foot race where the competitors wore a full suit of armor enticed many hopeful champions into the Olympic Stadium. The combined running, jumping, wrestling, javelin throwing, and hurling the discus event known as the pentathlon.
Does anyone do discus in track? Hopefully, I tried that one time.
World-class competition, and the Pancration, a no-holds-barred fight where only biting and eye gouging were prohibited, ensured the toughest men were victorious. And victorious they were. Nobody tops the local baker Coroebus, who in 776 BC became the very first Olympic champion. And we'll never forget Orsippus of Megara, the 720 BC Olympic victor who tore away his loincloth so he could race unimpeded, inaugurating the ancient Greek tradition of competing in the nude. Now there's a winning streak if ever we've seen one. But all good things must end. In 391 AD, the Christian Roman Emperor Theodosius banned pagan practices, so the world soon bid a fond farewell to the Olympic Games. But just like those early Pancration athletes, you can't keep a good one down. And 1,500 years later, in 1896, the modern Olympic Games kicked off in Athens, Greece. Today, the Summer and Winter Olympics bring international world-class athletes together by the thousands, uniting fans by the billions for the world's foremost sporting competition. Citius, Altius, Photius, 3 cheers for the Olympics.
All right. So that gives you a little background on the Olympic Games and just how interesting that is, the history of it. So we're jumping back here. So yeah, there's a little intro for you. And now we are going to go over your map of Alexander the Great's empire. And you can get that out. It's the green handout that you received yesterday. It looks like this. So if you could pause the video and everyone get this paper out, and we are going to go over it together. If you do need some more time to finish it, maybe a few people need some time, you can go ahead and give 5 to 10 minutes to wrap that up. And for those of you who did finish, go ahead and just read quietly until everyone else is done, and then we will go over it together. Okay, great. So you are going to keep this in your social studies folder as notes. All right, so you do not need to hand this in to your crew teacher. We are not collecting this at this time. You need to keep this in your social studies folder as notes for empires. All right. And now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to Athens and Sparta. Okay, so these are two very different but very fascinating city-states that competed with each other in different areas and just had very, very different philosophies on what was the best way to have a government. Okay, so the Spartans were really tough guys, right? Like Michigan State Spartans, you think of, the helmet and they're fighters, they're warriors. Maybe you've seen the movie Sparta before. I think it's very, I don't know what it's rated. It's pretty intense, so I don't know if you should watch it. But if you know that movie, it's just a lot of fighting. Okay, so they were very excellent warriors. And the Athens were very peaceful, very philosophical, very focused on the arts and education, and they had a different form of government than the Spartans did. And it didn't center around war, but both were very, very successful. So we are going to jump into that. We'll start by watching your second video in the textbook from last week. And like I said before, if you watched it, that's fine. Watch it again. Always learn something new when you watch it the second time. So we are going to jump to interactive point 5. Enjoy.
In ancient Greece, violent internal conflict between border neighbors and war with foreign invaders was a way of life, and Greeks were considered premier warriors. Most Greek city-states surrounded themselves with massive defensive walls for added protection. Sparta, in its prime, was a different story, finding walls unnecessary when it had an army of the most feared warriors in the ancient world. So what was Sparta doing differently than everyone else to produce such fierce soldiers? To answer that question, we turn to the written accounts of that time. There are no surviving written accounts from Spartans themselves, as it was forbidden for Spartans to keep records. So we have to rely on those of non-Spartan ancient historians, like Herodotus, Thucydides, and Plutarch. These stories may be embellished and depict Sparta at the apex of its power, so take them with a grain of salt. For Spartans, the purpose for their existence was simple: to serve Sparta. On the day of their birth, elder Spartan leaders examined every newborn. The strong, healthy babies were considered capable of fulfilling this purpose, and the others may have been left on Mount Taygetus to die. Every Spartan, boy or girl, was expected to be physically strong, mentally sharp, and emotionally resilient, and it was their absolute duty to defend and promote Sparta at all costs. So in the first years of their lives, children were raised to understand that their loyalty belonged first to Sparta and then to family. This mindset probably made it easier for the Spartan boys, who upon turning 7 were sent to the Agoge, a place with one main purpose: to turn a boy into a Spartan warrior through 13 years of relentless, harsh and often brutal training.
So think about that, guys. I mean, that's from the age of 7. They're going to this school where they are taught very disciplined tactics of war and how to fight. And then they're also really studied hard with academics. Okay, so that's a very interesting take on school compared to what we have nowadays, I would say.
The Spartans prized physical perfection above all else, and so the students spent a great deal of their time learning how to fight. To ensure resilience in battle, boys were encouraged to fight among themselves, and bullying, unlike today, was acceptable. In order to better prepare the boys for the conditions of war, the boys were poorly fed, sometimes even going days without eating. They also were given little in the way of clothing, so that they could learn to deal with different temperatures.
So these boys were tough, all right? They were fine with some fighting on the streets, and bullying was accepted because it taught the people that were getting bullied to stand up for themselves, right? And then they were also not always fed a lot of food, so they were probably in very, very fit and prime condition physically. And although they were never starved, their bodies learned how to adapt and be hungry and still press on and not get down mentally. So it's very interesting and strong society.
Spartan boys were encouraged to steal in order to survive, but if they were caught, they would be disciplined, not because they stole, but because they were caught in the act. During the annual contest of endurance in a religious ritual known as the Diamastigosis, teenage boys were whipped in front of an altar at the sanctuary of Artemis Orthia. It was common for boys to die on the altar of the goddess.
We're in the building. Please come to the front office. Denaya Montgomery, please come to the front office if you're in the building. Thank you.
Fortunately, not everything was as brutal as that. Young Spartans were also taught how to read, write, and dance, which taught them graceful control of their movements and helped them in combat. While the responsibilities for the girls of Sparta were different, the high standards of excellence and expectation to serve Sparta with their lives remained the same. Spartan girls lived at home with their mothers as they attended school. Their curriculum included the arts, music, dance, reading, and writing. And to stay in peak physical condition, they learned a variety of sports, such as discus, javelin, and horseback riding.
So the girls were trained as well. They were not just stay-at-home wives, second-class citizens. They also were in peak physical condition. They had very high education. They got to learn things like horse riding and different track events that we know today. So the women were also in peak physical condition, very intelligent. The society in general just have very, very high expectations for their citizens.
In Sparta, it was believed that only strong and capable women could bear children that would one day become strong and capable warriors. To all Spartans, men and women, perhaps the most important lesson from Spartan school was allegiance to Sparta. To die for their city-state was seen as the completion of one's duty to Sparta. Upon their death, only men who died in battle and women who died in childbirth were given tombstones. In the eyes of their countrymen, both died so that Sparta could live.
Okay, so be thinking about Sparta as we now watch this next video on Athens. And you are going to be analyzing tomorrow, which city-state would you have rather lived in? Would you rather be with the tough Spartans, or would you rather have lived in Athens? So now let's get a glimpse into what it was like to live a day in ancient Athenian.
It's 427 BCE, and the worst internal conflict ever to occur in the ancient Greek world is in its 4th year. The Peloponnesian War is being fought between the city-states of Athens and Sparta, as well as their allies. The Athenians can't match the formidable Spartan army on land, so they've abandoned the countryside and moved inside the walls surrounding their city and port, now provisioned by a superior fleet and extensive maritime empire. The cramped conditions have taken a toll, and a recent plague wiped out a third of the population, but city life goes on. Archias and Dexalea live in the center of Athens. As a painter of high-class pottery, Archias is relatively well off and takes great interest in the city's affairs. Dexalea, on the other hand, can't participate in politics or own property. The couple are grateful to the gods that 3 of their 4 children, a son and 2 daughters, have survived past infancy. Many parents see daughters as a liability since they require dowries to find husbands, but Archias is confident that his wealth will allow him to make good matches for them without going bankrupt. Like many Athenians, the family owns slaves. Originally from Thrace, they were captured in war. Thrata does most of the housework and helps raise the children. Philon is a pedagogos who supervises the son's education, teaching him reading and writing. Archias is up early because there's a meeting of the Ecclesia, the assembly of citizens, taking place at dawn. Before setting out, he burns incense and pours a libation at the small shrine in the courtyard on behalf of his entire household. Dexalea will remain at home all day, teaching her daughters domestic skills. Later, she'll retire to the inner courtyard for some fresh air. When Archias arrives at the Agora, the civic and commercial heart of the city, he finds the square swarming with his fellow citizens.
All right, and this is where you should really pay attention because this is a major difference. Is the Athenians were very focused on democracy and having a lot of representation in their government. Okay, so listen up to this part.
Native-born adult males who have completed military training. Attached to the central monument is a notice board with the meeting's agenda. Today there's only one item of discussion: what to do with the people of Mytilene, a city on the island of Lesbos where a revolt against Athenian rule has just been put down. The meeting takes place on a hill west of the Acropolis, known as the Pnyx. The word means tightly packed, and the crowd of 5,000 citizens makes it clear why. The heralds purify the hill by sprinkling its boundary with pig's blood and call for order. As everyone sits on benches facing the platform, the presiding officer opens the meeting with the words, "Tis agoreven boulete," who wishes to address the assembly. One by one, citizens speak, some advising mercy, others bent on vengeance. A motion is proposed to execute all the Mytileneans and enslave their women and children because they betrayed their Athenian allies during a time of war.
So one similarity to Sparta and Athens is they both demanded loyalty to their, city-state, right? So the Athenians are also saying, like, listen, these people revolted against Athens. They need to be punished. They need to be killed. Our loyalty to our city-state is the most important thing.
A majority raises their right hands in favor. Once the meeting's over, Archias heads back to the Agora to buy food and wine. Hundreds have gathered there to discuss the results, many unhappy with the decision. When Archias returns home, he tells Dexalea about the debate. She thinks that killing the innocent as well as the guilty is harsh and counterproductive, and tells him as much. Around dusk, Archias goes to a friend's house for a symposium. The 9 men drink wine and discuss the meeting well into the night. Archias shares his wife's opinion, urging mercy, and his friends eventually agree. Before dawn, something unprecedented happens. Heralds circulate throughout Athens, announcing the council has called another meeting. The second debate is equally heated, but a new resolution to execute only the leaders of the revolt narrowly passes. Yet there's a problem. A ship with orders to carry out the first resolution was dispatched the previous day. And so another ship quickly set sail to countermand the order, a race of democracy against time. Did you enjoy this glimpse of daily life in an ancient civilization? If so, check out our...
So did you catch that? Okay.
Day in the Life playlist.
All right, so did you catch that at the end there? At the end of that video, they were describing how one ship headed out to go carry out the orders of the first meeting, and then another ship had to say, wait, they got to quick catch up. Well, I guess they're rowing. Gotta catch up, because there was a second meeting late last night, and now everything's turned around. They're still deciding. And so you can see how with all these different voices, decisions were made after a longer period of time potentially, versus Sparta, where there was a pretty much set rule, and then that was the rule, right? So now you're kind of thinking about it. Maybe you can pause the video and discuss with someone next to you. Which one would you rather live in? What were the pros and cons of these two? Maybe you can't decide right now which one you'd rather live in, but maybe just ask your partner, say, hey, which one would you rather be in, Athens or Sparta? And then partner, why don't you say, hey, what about you? Which one would you rather live in, you think? What are the pros and cons of each one? All right, so go ahead and pause the video and have a 30-second conversation about that. And then once you're done, go ahead and play the video. Okay, great. So now at this time, teachers, you can go ahead and pass out this yellow paper. Okay, so we just did a green paper. Now we're doing a yellow paper, and it's called The Middle Period, Athens and Sparta. So you are reading this, all right? Read it over first, okay? Go ahead and just read through it. Maybe highlight or underline those bolded words so that you can find them again when you're looking at the backside, okay? If you notice with the Macedonians worksheet that we did, those bolded words were often answers or key points that you needed to find with the questions, right? And they didn't go in order necessarily. So you had to go back, you had to find, oh, I remember reading about that and I got to go find it. So what I would suggest with the middle period, read over it first and then look at these on the backside. Once you have this in front of you, go ahead and look at number 1. What you're doing is you are circling if this statement represents A or S, Athens or Sparta. All right, so you're circling the letter that the statement is referring to, okay? Now, number 1, they did not have a democracy. Is that Athens or is that Sparta? All right, well, who knows? I'll give it to you right now. Sparta, right? Athens did have a democracy. We saw that in the video. They all voted. They met again. Everyone had the right to speak. Those meetings probably took hours, guys. Remember they said 5,000 people were gathered? So they did have a democracy. So therefore, it's Sparta. You might not read in this that it might not say, Sparta did not have democracy. You might not see that, but we do know that Athens did have democracy. So you can, by process elimination, realize Athens did. Therefore, the answer is S. So you're going to circle S. So you're going through and doing that worksheet for the rest of the hour today, and then you can work on that as homework tomorrow. You'll have time to work on that tomorrow because the question of the day tomorrow is referring still to Athens and Sparta. You're not watching a video or it's not CNN 10, anything like that. So you'll have time to do this tomorrow during your 15-minute social studies lesson. And then the last thing we're doing today is the reflection. So at the end of the hour, go ahead and spend about 5 minutes answering this reflection question. In the United States, what might be a similarity that we see in our country with both Sparta and Athens? All right, so you choose one. You don't have to do a similarity to Sparta and a similarity to Athens. Try to think of just one and then explain it, okay? So in the United States, after watching this video, after reading about Athens and Sparta, and after reading in the textbook on Friday, after you took your quiz, you read pages, I believe it was 99 to 102. What are some similarities? What's one similarity that you can see with how we are today, how our country is, or things you see in the news or around the world that you can see a connection to with how Sparta was or how Athens was, okay? So this is definitely a thinking question. It's a application to today's world. So give your best. We want you to really think about this, but don't spend too much time on it, okay? Just do your best. All right, that's it for social studies today. Thanks for following along with me, and we will see you tomorrow.